while I put you in a trance. Let's party. Boogie in your body. Want that body, want that body. Make sure you don't hurt nobody. I say, hey, 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 feeling the fire when it burns inside.
Hello guys, before I start listing the builds, I would like to remind you that all builds that I made for open world have the potential for soloing legendary bosses, but since the community requested and voted for tier listing, I decided to make this video. But keep in mind, the goal of those videos is to provide a solid build that allow you to play the class that you like to do open world content with ease. So without any further ado, let's start the video. Since open world is not only for soloing but also grinding, I decided to make two separate lists, solo list and grind list, to explain the potential of each build in terms of soloing and grinding. Okay, let's start with the Soulbeast. The Soulbeast can deal huge amount of damage since it can reach to 3000 condition damage because its ability to merge with the pit to get more stats. Soulbeast can sustain itself while inflicting poisons or by protection that you get after each dodge. Also, it can reduce the damage up to 99% thanks to Doliac stance and protection. The idea of using daggers instead of shortbow is because the amount of condition damage and the duration of daggers is almost double the amount in shortbow skills. So the build is very tanky, nice amount of damage and healing, so I put it in A rank. As for grinding, the Soulbeast has a decent amount of medium range AoEs, Torch 5, F2 and F3, and I advise you if you're going to grind with a Zerg, swap Doliac stance with the Flame Trap for extra AoE damage with a low cooldown. Since Soulbeast is focused on melee attacks, it won't be able to hit all mobs all the time because of the cooldowns in his AoE skills, so I decided to put it in B rank. Next build is the Firebrand. The Firebrand sadly got tons of sustained nerfs for the past 2 years and reworks, so in order to play Condi, you have to go full offense straight line in order to get decent damage. But in return, you will have no sustain except your main healing skill that can heal you only once every 25 seconds, which is not ideal for soloing since making a mistake will be punishable. So I decided to make a power build to provide extra more sustain, more toughness, and to reduce the cooldown on healing skill. The power Firebrand have a decent amount of damage that can kill legendary bosses along with a lot of Condi removal and break stuns, might stacks and quickness for fast cleaves. But since power damage can be reduced by protection and weakness, and the Firebrand doesn't have the ability to strip boons in order to do decent damage, so I decided to put it in D rank. As for grinding, the Firebrand have really amazing potential in grinding, since it can refresh the cooldown of his F1 skill, Tome of Justice, every time a mob die. You can almost spam your F1 skill while grinding an open world with a Zerg. The F1 skill deal range damage that allow you to hit all mobs for looting and resetting your F1 every time a mob die, and every time you use your F1 skill you grant yourself a quickness. And I advise to swap the utility skill Smite Condition with the Sword of Justice for extra more range AoE cleaves, so Firebrands can deal nice amount of cleave damage, supporting his allies with his mantras and perma quickness. So I decided to put it in A rank. Next is going to be the Mirage. The Mirage is the easiest build to play with and a really strong one. The Mirage can provide you perma 25 might, protection, regen, vigor, perma-inflict, damage reduction and summon clones, all that by only pressing the dodge button. Not only that, by dodge you unlock Mirage ability, which is Mirage Cloak, that change your number 1 skill to a new skill called Chaos Vortex, which it is your main damage that inflict bleeding, torment and burning, and granting might and fury. And every time you dodge, your clones also cast Chaos Vortex, so all you have to do is spam dodge and press 1. The rest of the skills is only to provide an uptime, protection, vigor and sustain. That's why I decided to put Mirage in A rank. As for grinding, Mirage skill can hit up to 10 mobs on its path with a heavy condition damage. The only negative part about Mirage clones: when you summon a clone after dodge, the clone attacks the closest mob instead of your target, and once a mob dies, the clone die with it. And since we need uptime clones to spam Chaos Vortex in order to reach 25 stacks of might, it will be hard to keep up the stacks while a clone dies, so Mirage cannot control his clone's attacks and can't keep them up all the time when a mob die, so I decide to put Mirage in B rank. Next is going to be the Spellbreaker. The Spellbreaker is the best mobile build that can deal huge amount of power damage, and the more you hit, the more mites you generate. So it's easy to reach 25 mites, and every time you generate a mite, you also heal yourself. And what makes a Spellbreaker better than Berserker is the ability to strip wounds. Unlike Firebrand, the Spellbreaker can strip wounds by using his F2 skill, the full counter, or by using his CC utility skill, Kick. Also, when a Spellbreaker strips wounds from a foe, it inflicts more damage to them, and generate a DPS buff called Attack Insight that gives more power damage and critical damage. But since legendary bosses and some champions have a passive amount of toughness, they can still reduce a portion of power damage, so I decide to put Warrior in C rank. As for grinding, the Spellbreaker have a nice quick melee AoE cleaves that can hit up to 3 to 5 targets, depend on the skill. And if you're going to grind, I advise swapping the utility skill Kick with the break enchantments to deal more medium range and heavy AoE damage with the short cooldowns. So, since the Spellbreaker can cleave mobs with a decent speed and with short cooldowns, I decide to put it in B rank. Next is the Weaver. The Weaver can inflict huge amount of burning damage that allows you to kill hero points champions in less than a minute. The Weaver has a decent defensive skills that allow you to avoid and reflect, invuln or block incoming damage for a decent time. The only negative part about the Weaver, his only sustain skills is the healing skill in the elite skill, the Ice Element. The Ice Element can be interrupted while casting his healing skill, so it's hard to keep up the heal while dealing damage as a Weaver against legendary bosses, so I decide to put Weaver in B rank. As for grinding, all Weaver burning skills is a melee AoE cleaves, just like a Spellbreaker. The only difference is the Weaver cannot sustain itself like a Spellbreaker when dealing damage, so it will be hard to keep up cleaving while taking damage from random mobs, so Weaver will be in C rank. Up next is going to be the Deadeye. The Deadeye, one of the heaviest single target damage that can deal huge amount of damage on its target while staying in range. With an uptime boons and uptime condition damage, it also can reduce the market target damage up to 86%. It has 7 sources of healing, bunch of mobile skills. The only negative part about Deadeye is making a mistake in the rotation is punishable. So it's required practice with Malice rotation, but once you get used to it, you can easily solo legendary and champion bosses, so I decide to put it in A rank. As for grinding, sadly, since Deadeye is focusing its damage on the market target only, means it cannot generate malices from any mobs except the marked one, and it doesn't has any AoE. Same thing goes to pistol, it can't pierce targets unless if you use pierce traits that will result to reduce your damage. So I advise, if you're going to use Deadeye to grind, swap your utility skill, roll for initiative with the prepare 1000 needles for heavy AoE condition damage, but still the lake of cleaves will result to poor AoE damage, so I'm going to put Deadeye in D rank. Next is going to be the Scourge. The Scourge is basically a brain dead build with no specific rotation that can deal huge amount of range condition damage, tons of barriers. It can heal itself by converting 10% of the damage to heal. Can generate a lot of life force, reducing damage and converting enemy boons to conditions. It also can spread his shade to 3 different locations, including the Scourge location, to deal more AoE condition damage on those locations. Its range attack cannot be reflected since they are not projectiles. The only negative part about Scourge that some legendary bosses they can reduce Scourge damage, resulting to reduce the healing. But still, that kind of bosses is really rare to encounter. So I decide to put Scourge in S rank. As for grinding, Scourge can spread his shade to hit many mobs in different locations at the same time, and every time a mob die, you generate life force to deal more damage. And if you're going to grind as a Scourge, I advise swapping your utility skill Desiccate to Epidemic to spread more Candy AoE cleaves. So I'm going to put Scourge in A rank. Up next is Holosmith. Holosmith, just like Weaver, can inflict a heavy burning damage and can sustain itself with a decent amount of healing every time it leaves Photon Forge, with the perma protection to reduce the incoming damage. The only negative part about Holosmith, making a mistake in the rotation or overheating, is really punishable and it might kill you. So it requires practice and focus on rotation and heat couch. So I decide to put it in B rank. As for grinding, some of Holosmith's skills are not AoE and they have a small radius. So I decide to put it in C rank. And finally is going to be the Renegade. The Renegade, in my opinion, is the strongest. Can easily out-DPSing Scourge with a huge amount of torment damage that can reach up to 50 stacks with 25 might and 25 vulnerability, which leads you to kill hardest legendary bosses in less than 5 minutes. It has short cooldowns, it can heal itself to full HP while dealing damage, alongside with really heavy CC that can break legendary break bar in 1 to 2 minutes easily. So speed killing, big amount of healing and heavy crowd controls and access to melee and range. So I decide to put Renegade in S rank. As for grinding, all Renegade skills are AoE cleaves and the radius of its utility skills are huge. And the more mobs you damage, the more healing you receive, and can generate 15 to 25 mites to allies alongside with alacrity. If you're going to grind mobs, I advise you to swap your trait line and Renegade all for one with Heart Piercer to allow all your short bow skills to pierce targets, to hit up to 5 targets, and to increase your bleeding damage by 25%. So, tons of heavy AoE cleaves, more healing receive, and also supporting allies. So I decide to give Renegade an S rank. So I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and remember, the main goal is to play the class that you love. So thanks for stepping by, and special thanks to everyone that supported my channel. See ya and have a nice day.